All right, well, the Young Turks, Cenk, you, John, I roll with you guys. Johnny Pie, good to see you, brother.
Good to see you, too. I feel like this is maybe the third time I've seen you in 5 months.
I know, right? Since we don't do the show together on Wednesdays, and there's not that many elections anymore, I kind of miss you, Johnny Pie.
I know. I miss me, too. No, of course, I miss you, too. I worry, though, since it's been so long since you've done a show with me, like, you know how, like, if you haven't seen someone in a long time and they gain a lot of weight, it just all comes as one big shock? Well, I've gone a lot crazy, and you haven't been, like, sort of catching up on the crazy along the way. So I'm a little bit worried about what's going to happen, but we'll see.
Oh, well, that's kind of fun. I like that. And, when we're not in the studio together, we understandably have slightly different shots. So even though in real life I have a gigantic head in more ways than one, in the shot of us together, it appears that you have the larger head, which I kind of enjoy.
I might lean back a little bit whenever we're like this, just so I won't visually dominate the medium.
Okay, all right. So, guys, we're about to do a fun and disastrous show for you guys, as usual, of course. Roger Stone, Tucker Carlson, Barry Weiss. I mean, it's a parade of horribles. Is not really. That's a wrong phrase, but it feels like a parade of horribles. But before we do any of that, let's check in on the good guys. Every day I look at your guys' names as folks give to tyt.com/go, and every day I'm amazed. And in the post game, you know what? I know we got a lot of stories, but I'm going to give you a personal note too on how you guys helped me this morning. But for the moment being, let's look at our thermometer to see how healthy and viable we are. 46,125. Can we see 47,000? tyt.com/go. Nothing but love for you guys. We do this show together, and everybody else can take a long walk off a short dock. Okay, so talk about that during the show too. In the famous words of oh my God, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. Lannister, the good-looking guy, the one Anna interviewed.
Oh, Jamie Lannister?
Yes, Jamie Lannister. Anyway, you know the one about everybody else that isn't us. Okay. All right. So, John, take it away.
Okay, let's have fun with the news, everyone. Roger Stone is taking a little bit of a media victory lap after being rewarded by the president for the simple transaction of hiding the president's crimes and then eventually being commuted his sentence, as was clearly promised behind the scenes. Here he is on Sean Hannity's program.
When you're up against the horrific and deep-pocketed resources of the federal government and these really sadistic, arrogant, politically motivated prosecutors, I had a biased judge, I had a stacked jury, I had a corrupt jury forewoman. As my friend Tucker Carlson said, my trial was over before it started.
We've seen this now with Papadopoulos. We've now seen this with Paul Manafort. We saw it with General Flynn. We've seen it with you. I'll be honest, Roger. I believe in our Constitution. I believe in our rule of law. I don't know. I'm losing faith in the system, Roger.
Well, you have a good reason to. I mean, you examine the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, where I had to file a last-minute emergency appeal of Judge Jackson's rule sending me to jail. She ignored all the legal precedents in that. She ignored my health conditions. She ignored the conditions at the prison at that time. And she ignored the current policies of DOJ and the BOP. Now, you would have thought that would have been reversed in the appeals court, but they ruled for her 3-0. I'm afraid this is a fixed system.
Okay, so you have to leave that video thinking, man, poor Roger Stone. Every single person involved in that trial was corrupt and against him, which sort of reminds me of, you ever met the guy who's like, the way he tells it, every girl he's ever dated was crazy, and you start to wonder if he was actually the crazy one? Well, if like everyone in the courtroom was corrupt, and Roger Stone is the bastion of integrity and honor, I don't believe that that's actually what happened, basically.
Yeah, well, I have another fun story regarding that. When I was in high school, we went out to lunch with another friend of ours, and there was two of us in the car, and other than the guy driving. The guy driving drove like an absolute maniac and nearly got into 3 accidents. He peels into the parking lot and goes, "Can you believe people on the road today?" Okay. By the way, that guy became a Goldman Sachs partner. So
big risk takers.
Yeah. So, but that's exactly it. I mean, in reality, of course, Roger Stone was convicted on 7 counts, including obstruction of justice, to hide the corruption of Donald Trump. Then Donald Trump, hilariously and tragically, did the corrupt thing of pardoning the guy who obstructed justice on his behalf. That is why guys like Mitt Romney flipped out even more about this, right? Mm-hmm. Saying, I mean, look, the other friends of yours that you pardoned because they were on Celebrity Apprentice or once gave you a loan earlier in your life was already despicable enough. Yeah, but now you're beginning to commute the sentence of your co-conspirators. I mean, it doesn't get any more corrupt than that. And then what does Roger Stone do? As usual, he flips the truth on its head and comes out and says, "Can you believe the corruption?" Against poor old me.
Yeah. Well, I agree with both of them in that clip in limited ways. Stone says, the trial was over before it began. And in terms of consequences, it really was. I mean, he had already seen at that point how multiple Trump flunky cases go. And he knows that if you flip on the president, you're still probably going to go to jail for a while. But if you keep his secrets, he'll probably protect you. And when you have Trump tweeting things like talking about rats cooperating with law enforcement and how Stone's got guts, he knew exactly what he needed to do to eventually stay out of prison. And so he got it. And Hannity saying, that he's lost faith in the system, right there with you, buddy, because the system is such that Trump can just obstruct justice himself. Let's not forget that happened. Any of his allies who do make it harder to actually pin crimes on him. And then after we know that they're doing this, we know that they're lying. Roger Stone and right-wing media all throughout the 2016 election were so giddy with all this stuff Roger Stone was getting and how he was going to help out and everything. And now they're all pretending that it didn't happen and that they weren't excited about it. Now suddenly he doesn't know anything, wasn't involved in anything. It's all just a sham and a run-of-the-mill sham going forward. That if Trump continues in office, that'll be a best-case scenario, that they get, convicted and then eventually commuted by our corrupt president. In the future, we probably won't have enough information to actually convict him in the first place.
Yeah. Okay, now let's do analysis that you're not going to find anywhere else. So I'm with John. There's some truth in what they said. It's just flipped on its head. So is the system politically rigged against some people, and does it commit horrific unfairness? Yes, it does. So let me tell you about the people who rigged it. So John Ehrlichman was the domestic policy chief for Richard Nixon. And that is when the war on drugs began in earnest, where they said it was a plague upon the country and the worst enemy of America. I think we've heard things like that recently as well, except now it's the media, apparently. Anyway, Ehrlichman explained the Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had 2 enemies, the anti-war left and black people. Okay, so now this is getting really interesting. He went on to say, you understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. So the point of the war on drugs was to disrupt the black community and liberals. So it doesn't get any more political than that. Now, how did that work? Well, it unfortunately worked spectacularly. So when they started that campaign in 1971, they were so effective that only 12% of the country thought that marijuana should be legal. And then they started locking people up. So I'll give you a couple of facts here. 4 out of 10 drug arrests are for marijuana. Now, obviously, they targeted heroin as well, but marijuana is the one that took off in terms of their arrests and the oppression that they came along with it. And that's in 2018. Okay, and mostly for just possession. In fact, nearly 90% of arrests are just for possession. I understand that sometimes there's plea deals, but overall, that is a frightening number. Now, you want to see a frightening number? You know how many people were arrested for marijuana in a single year? 660,000. 660,000 people were arrested for cannabis in 2018 alone. I mean, you want to talk about rigged, and it was meant to target people of color and the left wing. And so did they target people of color? Hell yes. You know, Ehrlichman in that quote talked about pitting heroin on black people. They obviously changed course later and pinned marijuana on black people too, because white people and black people smoke marijuana at nearly identical rates. But black people are arrested at 3.64 times more, not percent, times more. So nearly 400% more arrests of black people, even though they did the crime of smoking marijuana at the same rate as white people. So It was systemic injustice and racism done for political reason to, over the span of those decades, to imprison millions of our fellow Americans for their political purposes. That is sick and gross, and it has never been addressed.
Yeah. You know, I don't think that we have time to play all the videos, but in a later part of it, Roger Stone says one of the reasons I couldn't go to prison is because, like, I have asthma and there's a lot of coronavirus in prisons. You know, some of those prisons are filled with people like what you're talking about. And so I'm sure that now that he has, you know, dodged a bullet, he's going to take up their cause and advocate for leniency in sentencing and letting people out so that they don't succumb to an illness he was so desperate to avoid. But, you know, you mentioned that you're going to do analysis that you won't get anywhere else. So let's continue in that vein. Let's have some self-analysis that you won't hear anywhere else. I want to ask you, do you think that we have been beaten down? And the reason I say that is the president just rewarded a flunky for keeping his secrets, and he's going to walk. And, like, we're doing a story on it. Probably talk about it a few times. And then that's it. People aren't in the streets. He's not going to be impeached for this. It's obviously corrupt. Like, no one outside of Fox News doesn't get how obviously self-servingly corrupt this is. But nothing's going to happen. Yeah,
well, there's only one consequence left, John. There's no way in the world they're going to impeach a second time in this short period of time. I mean, if he wins the second term, 2-2-2, you know, then I don't know what's going to happen, but probably immediate surrender by the Democrats who will wet themselves. But there's really only the election left. And since he has gotten away with all of this, if he gets reelected, there are no more rules. You know, that's it. We're a full-blown oligarchy ruled now by Trump and his donor class. And they can do anything and break any law, and Trump will just pardon them or commute their sentence. We just told them there's no consequences. It's not at all hyperbole. I don't care what anybody says. And finally, I think a lot of people have caught on to what we've been saying, John, from day one. If he wins a second term, he's going to end it. He's going to end democracy. He will commit endless crimes, and he will pardon anyone it takes. He's already done it. And if he wins, he's going to say that as a carte blanche to do anything he wants.
Yeah, I would go so far as to say it would be a carte blanche to do whatever he wants. I mean, worst case scenario for him, he commits more crimes and, like, you know, we probably won't find out about it because there won't be any IGs anymore or anything like that. But let's say we do find out about it. What are they going to report on his crimes? His fans don't care about that. They don't trust the media. They believe the media is inherently corrupt. So all of their reporting is suspect. They want him to pardon those people because they identify them. Roger Stone is a legitimate, insane person, but they think that he's one of them. He believes the same conspiracies they do. He'll fight for the same person they worship. So, like, there is no check anymore at that. Even finding out what they did, it doesn't matter. He can continue to break those laws. It'll only endear him more to his base.
Yeah, no question about it. Look, guys, I know everybody's got a slightly different opinion, and I'm not trying to shame anyone, okay? But if ever you needed a reason to vote against a particular candidate, this is it. This is it. This is not Romney versus Obama. This is not Clinton versus Dole, okay? One guy is an establishment guy that we will be able to influence in some small ways. For example, on the issue that I talked about, war on drugs, Joe Biden we will get him to end the war on drugs. It would be insane if we couldn't. Now, don't get me wrong, his record on that is terrible, okay? But there will be a world of pressure on him, and he will succumb to that pressure because that's who Joe Biden is. Trump won't care at all. He'll imprison 600,000 people on marijuana charges every single year for the next 4 years. No amount of pressure will work, and he'll do the corruption, and likely he'll end democracy. I've never seen a bigger no-brainer in my life. Never. And I say that as a guy who doesn't even like the other guy in the race. Okay? It's not close. We got to get him out in 4 months. Otherwise, it was a nice little experiment we had in democracy here. And not bad. It lasted almost 300 years.
Well, why don't we turn from that president to the person that, assuming Trump ever does step down, will probably follow him to the White House, Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson finally addressed the Friday revelation that his head writer was about as big and outspoken a racist as anyone could possibly imagine, or at least he sort of addressed it. Take a look at the slightly more than 1 minute he spent dealing with this.
Over the weekend, you may have seen stories about a writer on this show called Blake Neff. For years, since he was in college, Blake posted anonymously on an internet message board for law school students. On Friday, many of those posts became public. Blake was horrified by the story, and he was ashamed. Friday afternoon, he resigned from his job. We want to say a couple of things about this. First, what Blake wrote anonymously was wrong. We don't endorse those words. They have no connection to the show. It is wrong to attack people for qualities they cannot control. In this country, we judge people for what they do, not for how they were born. We often say that because we mean it. We'll continue to defend that principle, often alone among national news programs, because it is essential. Nothing is more important. Blake fell short of that standard, and he has paid a very heavy price for it. But we should also point out to the ghouls now beating their chests in triumph at the destruction of a young man that self-righteousness also has its costs. We are all human. When we pretend we are holy, we are lying. When we pose as blameless in order to hurt other people, we are committing the gravest sin of all, and we will be punished for it. There's no question.
Cenk, before we launch into analysis of that, and there's certainly a lot there to delve into, let's play a quick game. Based purely on what he just said right there, not what you already know from reading the reporting and all of that, what did Blake Neff write? Based just on Tucker Carlson's commentary.
Well, John, not only did he write, fairly benign, middle-of-the-road stuff, he seems to have written it a long time ago in college or something like that.
It seems like, yeah, when he was in college for years, I don't know. You could watch that entire thing and have no clue whatsoever what this guy did. And that's by design.
So, in reality, of course, he wrote, as Fox News described it, horrifically racist material. Also bigoted, homophobic, and sexist. And he didn't do it back in college. He did it up until now. He wrote viciously racist things about George Floyd, showing no sympathy and calling him a career criminal based on what information I don't know. He called black people pets. But he attacked Asians. He attacked everyone. He attacked individual women and had these group of vicious racists and sexist target her. I mean, this guy is the worst of the worst, the most toxic guy you could imagine based on his writings. And I did a long video about it yesterday. You should check that out for some of the quotes. And the other part that Tucker doesn't mention, John, is that to the best of my knowledge, publicly, Blake Neff has never even apologized. Mm-hmm. So it makes it seem like, oh, this guy from like 38 years ago says something, a couple of things, and now, hey, who would be sympathetic to that? I would be sympathetic to that if the guy had changed. He has not at all changed. He's still a vicious racist.
No, hold on, Cenk. Now, Tucker said he's ashamed, okay? Now, he could be ashamed about one of two things. About what he wrote and then changed in the last 2 weeks, or that he got caught. It's one of those two things. I don't know which.
Yeah, it used the N-word throughout. He just does every racist thing you can imagine, has never apologized. And if you notice, Tucker Carlson said, to John's point, that Neff was horrified by the story. Not horrified by what he said, but by the fact that the story came out. That was his head writer. That was Tucker basically saying, we were doing a terrific job of covering up our racism. Now we're horrified that people found out. Now he's fired. I might even be fired. We'll get to that in a second. And so we're horrified. God, we had a good racket going.
Yeah.
And then he says there's no connection to the show. If you read the original CNN piece, you'll see quotes where you take out the N-word or take out another racist word, and it goes right into Tucker Carlson's script. And the guy brags about it, about like, hey, I write the scripts, ha ha ha, right? And then Tucker there in the worst non-apology I've ever seen in my life, claimed that his show alone is the one fighting against racism. No other show is, but Tucker's is. Now, they just flipped the truth on its head, and they do it all the time. They're absolutely Orwellian.
Yeah, they're the most anti-racist, and the guy who wrote the racist comments is an ashamed man whose life has been destroyed. The people who reported on are ghouls beating their chest. So that was interesting, too. Okay, so look, obviously there's no apology from Blake Neff that's referenced there. But what about Tucker's apology for having a vicious racist as his head writer? Oh, wait, that wasn't there either. Oh, there was nothing. There was literally nothing there. It's amazing. He spoke for 1:17, made himself out to be the victim, and superior to all of the people who presumably don't have N-word throwing racists as their head writers, and then implied that the guy had been mistreated, that his life has now been destroyed. But with all of what we've said, understand all of that, he is now facing the most severe consequences a Fox News host can for being involved with vicious racism. He gets to take a vacation. Let's watch.
Well, we're out of time. Going to spend the next 4 days trout fishing. Long planned. This is one of those years where if you don't get it in now, you're probably not going to. If something dramatic happens, of course, we'll be back. We've got some tape segments for you. Brian Kilmeade will be sitting in. But in the meantime, we hope you have the best and happiest week, and we'll be back on Monday, if not before, 8 p.m. Eastern, the show that is the sworn and totally sincere enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink.
Strikes me as a big fisher.
Yeah. All right, before we get into the substance of it, God, he can't, every sentence has to include something Orwellian. Tucker Carlson is against pomposity and smugness. He's the definition of pomposity and smugness. He wore a bow tie on Earth and said, I do declare, for about 2 decades. That was his shtick, that he was a pompous, smug ass. And he still is. And he says, well, we are the sworn enemy of the pompous. We have declared war, and really, I can't believe how smug they are. All right, now on to the vacation. Yeah, a lot of people... Long planned. No, John, to be fair, a lot of people plan vacations starting on a Tuesday, right after a giant controversy surrounding them. Well, it happens all the time. Actually, on Fox News, it kind of does, doesn't it, John?
Yeah, well, why don't we go to a couple examples we've been able to find.
But the whole thing is a lie. If you were to assemble a list, a hierarchy of concerns, of problems this country faces, where would white supremacy be on the list? Right up there with Russia, probably. It's actually not a real problem in America. The combined membership of every white supremacist organization in this country, would they be able to fit inside a college football stadium? I mean, seriously. This is a country where the average person is getting poorer, where the suicide rate is spiking. White supremacy, that's the problem. This is a hoax. Just like the Russia hoax. It's a conspiracy theory used to divide the country and keep a hold on power. That's exactly what's going on. That's it for us tonight. Tune in every night, 8 p.m. to the show that is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, and smugness and groupthink. By the way, I am taking several days off, headed to the wilderness to fish with my son, catch some brook trout. Politics is important. Fishing with your son sometimes more important, so I'm doing it.
That is all the time we have tonight on this special edition of the Ingram Angle. A blessed Good Friday and Passover to all of you. I'll be off next week for Easter break with my kids, but fear not.
This time of year, I grabbed some vacation because it's spring and Easter time. Last fall, I booked a trip that should be terrific. I'll have a full report when I return.
So, yeah, we've noticed a correlation where sudden vacations seem to come about when you imply that white supremacy is a totally made-up fiction of people's imagination, when you get involved in bizarre feuds with the survivors of mass shootings, and when you sexually harass multiple women. So it's usually tied to one of those things.
Every single one of those clips. That's why we did the setup for you guys at the Tucker Carlson one. Every single one of those clips is after a massive controversy, the ones John just described, where the Fox News host said all of a sudden they realized they had, I had forgotten this fishing trip. As advertisers flee, Sean Hannity takes a sudden vacation. That's 444. Fox News host Laura Ingraham goes on vacation as more advertisers dump her over Parkland tweet. So what this is, guys, is, here we go, April 11th, 2017, amid a sexual harassment scandal and advertiser boycott, Bill O'Reilly went on vacation too. He also swore up and down that he'd be back when the trip was over. Just over a week later, he was fired. Bill O'Reilly, as it turns out, still fishing. Previously planned firing, fishing. Okay. So, guys, bottom line on this is what's happening at Fox News right now. Number one, they're doing two things. One is a well-worn strategy, as you just saw there, of, hey, let's give the news cycle a couple of days, and Trump will say 28 crazy, insane things by then, and you'll forget how racist Tucker Carlson and his head writer are, and we'll move on. And just in case it doesn't work, it also gives us a couple of days to plan out how we would fire him and replace him. So we'll weigh it out. In the case of Bill O'Reilly, they made a backup plan, and it turns out it didn't blow over. It was a giant Me Too movement, and he had horribly sexually harassed so many people, they paid tens of millions of dollars in lawsuits, and there was no way to make it go away. So they're like, yeah, stay fishing, you're fired. Laura Ingraham, Tucker Carlson in the past, Sean Hannity, they're like, yeah, no, it looks like it blew over, and everybody realizes we're racist at Fox News anyway. Let's move on. You guys are back. You're back from fishing. Welcome. So right now, I guarantee you, Fox News is making a plan to fire Tucker Carlson. That doesn't mean they're going to do it. They just have a plan A and a plan B. And so it's a nice little mystery as to whether Tucker Carlson will return from his fishing trip.
Cenk, we occasionally disagree, but I don't know that I've ever disagreed more than I am right now with you. There's no way they're going to fire him over this. Like, not only is the situation very different than Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly was 123 years old. He was on his way out no matter what. Tucker Carlson is like the up-and-coming critical thinker, populist, all that stuff. They think that he's the future of the right or whatever. Not to mention the fact that if something was going to get him fired, like, this is his head writer, and the things his head writer said, I think, are less all-encompassing in their support for white supremacy than the normal monologues that Tucker Carlson does. He says that immigrants make America dirty, not on forums, on air. Like, diversity isn't a strength. When has it ever been a strength? That was on his show. He said that. I just think that if he was going to go down for racism, it would have been when we found out that he, was like sexualizing young girls, the Media Matters info dump that they had, or when he said that Iraqis were semi-literate primitive monkeys or something like that. Like, the idea that he would go down for Blake Neff, I find that to be impossible to imagine.
So the only reason why you might be wrong, well, look, first of all, I know I would be shocked if they weren't making a plan A and plan B. That's what corporate folks do, okay? Second of all, the reason why this might be a little bit different is, like the Me Too movement, we're now in the middle of a significant movement, and it's not just about police abuse. It's about whether black people have real opportunities in the workplace. And it's not a matter of conscience. Of course, Fox News has no conscience. Their whole business model is built on racism and sexism and all those things, right? No, what they are now weighing with their accountants and finance guys and legal team is, how much is this going to cost us in lawsuits? Okay, so, we have Black employees, Latino employees, et cetera, et cetera. So the next time we fire them, rightly or wrongly, we're going to get sued. And so how much are we going to pay when a jury finds out that we put the most racist people in the world on air? And so they're going to weigh how much that costs versus how much revenue Tucker Carlson brings in. And they called it, Fox News executives called it horrifically racist. And Tucker did not apologize. And that's another thing I know about corporate executives. They don't like that, right? If you don't bow your head, they get into a kind of a primitive, I'll show you who the boss is kind of thing. So we'll see. We'll see. I'm not saying it's likely. I'm just saying that they're definitely considering it.
Yeah. We'll see. I would be shocked. But I'd like to be shocked, especially in 2020. You want shocking news is what you want. Anyway, we should probably take our first break, though.
All right. We got a lot more where that came from, including Barry Weiss, the king or queen of cancel culture, canceling herself. It's a fascinating story.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
We'll be right back. All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and John with you guys. Shout out to our progressive sponsor, Aspiration. That's a great place to keep your money, fossil fuel free. So save money, save the planet. Aspiration.com/TYT. They're about to get to 1 million trees planted. How's that for badass? And you could be, if you open up an account, you're 10 of those trees. Help save the planet. Okay. Nice. All right, now let me read some comments. Let me go to YouTube Super Chat first. There's so many of you guys. I love it. Melissa Sherman writes in, been a public defender for 10 years and a TYT fan for the past 3. Roger Stone makes me sick, but you guys inspire me on a daily basis to keep fighting. Melissa, you inspire me. I want to talk more about that in the post game and how you guys keep me going. And I want to go to our members as well. Apparently, B. Smith, by the way, on YouTube Super Chat says Trump's imploding right now on live TV. Somebody else, now to our members. Jim says Roger Stone is correct. If the system wasn't fixed, how would people like him keep getting away with it? Spot the Cat says worst case scenario, Trump wins a 3rd term. Oh my God. And there it is. This is what I was. Namun Lovey Depura 08 writes in, Cenk talking about the war on drugs. It just so happens I'm wearing my TYT Unite with the Light shirt. Love it. Shop TYT.com for that. And Shy Coltrane 42. I hope you're wrong. But I'm afraid you're probably right. You guys are up on it, and we're live on air right now. But saying RBG taken to the hospital. God help us all.
She seems to be doing well.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, I had not seen that. Thank you for keeping us up to date. Just one last quick thing. You know, I keep telling you guys I read your names behind the back page of Act Blue. I just want to give you a tiny sense of it. Maria from Ohio gave $50. Marco Antonio from Brazil gave $15. Elias from Sweden, $27. And I'm not reading their last names just in case, right? But it's just, you guys, it's the world. I love it. Joel from Seattle, 127. You're getting a T-shirt. We press on T-shirt. Roland from Utah, $250. You're getting a T-shirt too. Arnaud from Netherlands, it goes $15. It goes on and on. Every time I see it, I feel revitalized. So thank you guys. So those are all the donors at tyt.com/go. All right, John, go ahead.
Okay, let's do it. The White House is continuing their offensive against Dr. Fauci for the crime of being liked and respected by the American people. But while this is going on, and we'll have more on that in just a moment, Dr. Fauci himself is continuing to speak out in a critical fashion against the way America addressed coronavirus during the first wave, saying we did not shut down entirely, and that's the reason why we went up. We started to come down, and then we plateaued at a level that was really quite high, about 20,000 infections a day. Then as we started to reopen, we're seeing the surges that we're seeing today as we speak. Now, Dr. Fauci said this during an online medical forum, effectively, airing his concerns and also giving advice for the future. Notably, he did say during that appearance that he didn't think a total lockdown would be necessary. We will see in a few weeks if that turns out to be true. But before we get to the next thing that the White House is going to be releasing against him, what do you think about the strategy of going after Dr. Fauci at this particular point? I mean, we knew that there had been sort of some bubbling up tension a couple months ago, but they really did wait to take it from Fox News attacking him to the White House more directly trying to undermine him.
Yeah, so it really is sick because you could just fire the guy if you want and be done with it. No, they got to do character assassination first. Now, if you're wondering why, it's not gratuitous, although sometimes it feels that way with Trump. No, it's firing a popular doctor in the middle of a pandemic is not a good idea politically. Firing an unpopular doctor might not be so bad. So before they fire him, they've got to try to make him unpopular. And that's the sick game that's being played right now. They're not worried about actually the actual pandemic. He hasn't met with Fauci since June 2nd. He hasn't gotten any information on the virus. I mean, there's idiots in the Republican Party like Kemp, the governor of Georgia, just recently, I think it was last month, saying, oh, nobody knew that you could spread the virus if you're asymptomatic. How could you find that out in June, right? Trump obviously famously is talking about how maybe you could inject yourself with bleach to cure it. Only a moron of epic proportions who's never talked to a scientist would say that. And so, and since he feels humiliated because of himself, Fauci didn't make him say that, he said that, right? He thinks one, his personality trait is to take it out on somebody like Fauci, blame anyone but yourself, usually people under you, almost always people under you. But number two, make him unpopular enough so that you don't get blowback when you fire him. It's the sickness of the Trump administration. And honestly, about 35% of the country who sees all this and co-signs on it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about how they're going to accomplish the strategy that you're referencing there. This morning on the Damage Report, we talked about some of the opposition research that they've already started to circulate. You might have seen over the weekend a whole lot of reporters all talking about like this sort of scoop that they've got. And it turned out that the White House had sent it to everybody. But anyway, and then Kayleigh McEnany saying that they're not doing any opposition research. Well, now we find out that Stephen Moore, a member of the White House's task force on reopening the economy, is preparing a new attack against White House COVID-19 task force health expert Dr. Anthony Fauci in the form of a memo titled Dr. Wrong. And if I could respond, I would say, Dr. No. What a big waste of time. And that's what you came up with. The whole task force came up with Dr. Wrong. So look, they're combing through, it's gonna take weeks. That's what they're doing. They're gonna comb through and find things that he said about the virus that were inaccurate to attempt to shatter people's confidence in them, which might work, honestly. Although it seems somewhat intellectually dishonest when the entire world was and still is learning about coronavirus on a daily basis. And our ideas about things like spontaneous reemergence, how long antibodies last, its ability to be transmitted via air, that is still developing even today, let alone in June, May, April, March, all of that. And so, okay, you can point out things where Dr. Fauci was wrong. I guarantee everyone else has been at least as wrong.
So, John, a lot of the top scientists in the world then jumped to Fauci's defense. And they had a lot of great quotes saying he's one of the most accomplished doctors of our lifetimes. But I love Tom Frieden's quote. He's former director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And he said about Fauci getting some of the advice wrong in the beginning, he said, that's called science, not a mistake. The real deadly mistake is not listening to science. What he's saying there is Fauci was giving the best information that he had at the time. And the minute they got better information, they fix it because they actually believe in facts. Yeah. And that's how science works. Science doesn't come in with preconceived notions. That is literally the opposite of science. It tests out notions and then see which one is factually correct. But these monsters and barbarians and Neanderthals, they don't believe in science and they don't believe in facts. I mean, look at what John was explaining to you. The task force on reopening the economy could be doing things like this. For example, on reopening the schools, they could be having really important and interesting conversations about, wait, if there's teachers that have pre-existing conditions or are older, maybe we could have them zoom into a classroom. If there are kids with pre-existing conditions or grandparents at home, maybe they could zoom into the classroom. How could we make that happen? They could be having those type of conversations and 1,000 others. Instead, they're spending their time attacking the scientists who are actually trying to solve the pandemic, which of course, ironically, then makes the pandemic worse and makes it near impossible to reopen the economy. These are the morons and barbarians that currently occupy the White House.
Let me throw out just a couple more quick updates about why Fauci is saying what he's saying and why Trump is saying what he's saying about Fauci. And then I have one more point to make. Really fast, if we could jump to the coronavirus cases, you're gonna see a chart showing over time cases in the EU and the US. And you can see that in the EU, where they tended to trust Fauci types more than Trump or Tucker types, the cases went down. And there are still cases, but they've been fairly steady for a couple of months now, whereas we are now spiking once again. During all of this time, Dr. Fauci's sort of trust in the population for him to provide accurate information about the coronavirus is at 67%, whereas Trump has 26%. And boy, don't you want to have a long conversation with the people who reside in that 26%. But think about it, if he's mad, that's what the reporting says, the Washington Post, is Trump hates that someone who works for him is popular. A person he chose to communicate about medicine is liked by the American public for communicating about medicine. He finds that to be a bad thing. What a great boss. But think about it, if Trump had not been crazy when it came to every aspect of the pandemic from day one, saying insane things on a daily basis, would we even really know who Dr. Fauci is? Like, we would have seen him in some of the press conferences, but without the contrast of him versus people spreading active misinformation, including, as you said, that we could potentially drink disinfectants and we can shine a light up somewhere and that'll get rid of the virus, or that we've got 15 cases and it's gonna be gone in a couple of days. Like, Fauci only looks so good because no one else around him looked even middling. Like, if they had just taken it seriously, Trump could be the one with the high approval rating on the pandemic, like Obama had on his pandemic. But that's not the sort of self-analysis that he is likely to ever actually undergo.
Yeah, these when you see that chart, and that's why we show it to you often, it's an open and shut case. We lead the world in cases, but we also lead the world in deaths by a lot. We're near 140,000 deaths from coronavirus now. And if you think it's a matter of opinion, you're wrong. Science is real, facts matter. Fauci is right, Trump is wrong. And we've lost tens of thousands of more Americans' lives because of how wrong Trump was.
Yeah. Okay, why don't we take our last break and come back and do one more story with what remains of the hour.
All right. We'll be
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today.
right back. Back on the Young Turks, Cenk and John with you guys. Time for only a couple of comments. Actually, I'm going to go to Twitch where we're live now. Obi Mom Kenobi 7, who is awesome, donated 1,000 bits. Quote, because I agree with John about Tucker. All right, thank you. We played a game with her on Twitch too, so check all that out. And then on Twitter, that boy's hell on Turlet says, if there's one thing that conservatives hate, it's changing your mind based on new information. I love that quote. That's 100% right. And of course, no wonder they hate science. And by the way, meanwhile, people who donated to tyt.com/go recently, Peter from Australia, Elvia from Puerto Rico, Michael from UK, and Randall from Portland, Oregon. Okay, and by the way, Elvia, you're gonna get a t-shirt. Love you guys, okay? Can I see tyt.com/go and see where we are now? All right, 46,692. We didn't quite get to 47,000, but I believe we got a post game coming up soon. All right, guys, we've got to give you one more story. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, come on, it's post game. We're gonna make fun of Don Jr. and Trump. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Let's do that. Okay, with that, why don't we transition to something very serious? Let's talk about a story involving 2 police officers and an apparent tragedy. The first is Calvin Salyers, who you can see in this photo right here. He has apparently told investigators that he would shoot through the door, that's an actual quote, if any protesters showed up at his home. He did end up shooting through his door, but not at a protester. It was at another police officer. Here's a photo of Scott Hutton, who was eventually shot by Salyers. Calvin Salyers surrendered on Wednesday on a manslaughter charge in this shooting, which happened back on June 3rd. The officer that he shot, Scott Hutton, had apparently went to his colleague's home to pick up a patrol car, knocked on the officer's door, and an armed Salyers looked through a peephole to find a dark figure with a firearm. He says during a 911 call, Salyers, after shooting through the door, all I seen was a gun, it was an accidental discharge. And so initially it was approached as a tragic accident, a mistake, although new evidence indicates that that might not be the case. He had said that he accidentally discharged the weapon while transferring it from one hand to another, but investigators found contact residue around the bullet hole in Salyers' door, suggesting his weapon was pressed against it as he fired. There were actually 2 bits of evidence implying that it had been pressed firmly against the door before the weapon was discharged. If this isn't a mistake, if it was just an accidental discharge, it is difficult to imagine how irresponsible someone, let alone a cop, would have to be just casually bringing a gun to the door, transferring it with it pointed towards the door from one hand to another, and then accidentally discharging it. But Cenk, it doesn't necessarily look like that's gonna end up being what actually happened.
So there are 2 issues here. One is gun culture. So let me give you a quote from the affidavit. He said, when they heard the knock, Salyers told Cummings that he would see who it was and grabbed his Glock 40 caliber handgun and went to the door. I've never gone to the door with a gun. I mean, obviously I don't have one, so that makes a big difference, but I wouldn't even consider it. Okay, a knife is less than a gun. I would never consider grabbing a giant knife to go to the door at 7 o'clock in the evening. and thinking, you know what, maybe I murder the person on the other side of this door just in case. So, I mean, did it not occur to him that maybe somebody's coming to sell Girl Scout cookies, or someone is coming in to talk to him about running for office? These are things that normally happen at doors, right? Or a coworker's coming over.
Yeah.
Now he wanted to shoot through the door so bad. He'd been fantasizing about it for so long. That's why he told a fellow officer, I can't wait to shoot through the door. And the guy told him, don't do that, right? Now, the second problem is police culture. So, I mean, we've got a cop who was shot and killed, murdered, right? I mean, there's nothing that cops obviously hate more than a fellow cop being killed. The Alexander Police Department described the shooting as accidental. There's nothing accidental about that shooting. So it turns out the thin blue line is, even if you murder a fellow cop, who cares? We're gonna cover up for you. No matter what you do, or no matter who you kill, we will cover up your crimes, because we're the police. No.
Yeah.
Thin blue line is a terrible, terrible idea. It basically says the police are gangsters and they will cover each other's crimes up and make sure that no one is ever apprehended for their crimes. That's literally what thin blue line means. That means we stand together and defend each other in case any one of us is accused of any crime. And here, even if you killed a fellow cop, they're like, who cares? Who cares, fellow cop? Blue lives matter? No, they don't. As long as another cop shoots him on purpose.
Yeah, I know that we get criticized every time that we talk about a story like this and say that there are some people who just clearly fantasize about killing people. But like, I don't know how you're supposed to look at the story and not see that. It is such a specific fantasy, not just to want to kill someone, but to want to kill them in that very particular way. And then accidentally for that same thing to happen. We have to understand that we have sick people in this country, and it's relatively easy for them to get guns, relatively easy for them to become cops.
And then once they commit a crime, they know under no circumstances will their fellow officers ever hold them to account or bring them to justice.
Yeah.
Okay, we got an amazing post game where we're gonna dunk on Don Jr. and Ivanka. Ivanka with a let them eat cake moment that you're gonna love. TYT.com/join or hit the join button below. We'll see you there.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of the Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.